Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Aline.
Oh, sorry. Launching in a bit too enthusiastically. I'm Lily, and I'm going to be chairing this third session. And in case anyone's joined us since the last hour or so, just as a reminder, please mute yourself unless you're asking a question during a discussion or speaking as part of one of the presentations. Yeah, we are continue to be delighted to be here to celebrate all the wonderful young practices shortlisted for the AR Emerging Architecture Awards. And I'm so excited to hear from the next few practices about what they've learned and what advice they can give to others. I'm just going to share my screen. So for this final conversation of the day, we are, it's, sorry, I get really nervous at these things. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Taya Capital, Taya Gabriela Carrillo, Equipo de Arquitectura, Semillas, and Unparade Architectes. And we have asked each practice to bring along a 3-point emerging architects guide, as you've heard throughout the day, answering these 3 questions. First, what advice would you give yourself as an architecture student that you weren't told then but know now? What is an important lesson you've learned without being about being an emerging architect, specifically where you are in the world? And what's the best piece of advice you have been told, and by whom? Please all remember to drop any questions you have for our shortlisted architects in the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screens. And once everyone's finished their presentations, I can go around and invite you to ask them, or I can ask them for you if you like. So let's get started. First up, I've got Gabriela Carrillo. Gabriela, I'm delighted to hear from you today.
Hello everyone.
Hi.
Okay. Well, the first question, as Lily mentioned, can we see the image, Lily?
Oh, of course.
Thank you. Perfect. Well, it was, what advice would you give yourself as an architecture student? I think when I started to study architecture, I was crazy. I want to run so fast all the time, to visit all the places that I could. And later, I think I will tell myself, stay still, observe, slow down, remember your senses, consider otherness, and take a look to the things that are not built. So that's why I choose this image of Lina Bobardi, who is my goddess, because she let us know that architecture is just the canvas for really important things to happen. Next, please. Thank you. Well, the next was an important lesson of being an emerging architect where I am. And this was this is an image of the reality of the city where we live. It is very nice because I'm here with Taya Capital, and I teach a studio with Loretta Castro at UNAM. And we've been working with our students since there was a big earthquake in the city to work with cracks in our city. And it happens because of subsidence and because of the extraction of water and because of the lake bed and the volcanic stones. So I think that studying this has given me so much, and that I believe that crisis is an opportunity to work and a space for creativity. And this is my last image. The one in the picture is my kid. He's much more older today. He's 6 years old. And it was a construction process in one of my projects. So the question was, the best advice I have been told. And someone said to me, always take the risk. Move yourself from a comfort zone and conquer your fears. And well, I think one of my greatest fears was that having a son will take off my life from architecture, but now I realize that it's just a great complement and an amazing space to have architecture and my kid together. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. Next up, we have Equipo de Arquitectura.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Viviana Pozzoli, and I'm with Horacio Cherniaski. We are from Equipo de Arquitectura.
And we're going to be answering the questions. What advice would you give yourself as an architecture student that you weren't told then but know now? Architecture is an extremely complex profession. Learning architecture is an eternal collection of practical, experiential, and theoretical information. It's a slow process, so the sooner you start, the better. It's important to travel and learn from the different architectural approaches, the history and culture of each region of the world, and the many ways to inhabit the planet. Architecture is a collective deed, and it responds to the socio-economic and cultural realities of each time and place. We must learn to interpret these realities in order to offer an appropriate answer with architectural solutions. It's fundamental to nourish with art, especially with visual arts, to imagine alternative but complementary realities with architecture. What we learn in universities is only the beginning of a long and never-ending journey. Profound learning should be sought with real-life experiences, such as working in architecture studios, participating in construction processes, architecture competitions, workshops, traveling, and having constant contact with architecture.
Well, the second question, what is an important lesson you have learned about being an emerging architect? Okay, resources can't limit the quality of architecture, and architecture project is a tool to transform matter, space, the people, and the world. Scale doesn't matter. Every architecture project is an opportunity to experiment and test our capacity of using resources in the smartest way possible.
And the third question is, what's the best piece of advice you have been told and by whom? We believe that to become who you are is the best piece of advice we received in our formative years. This maxim can be found in Nietzsche's philosophy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Semillas.
Well, hi. Bueno, congratulations with all. And what advice will you give now to your young self? Well, my advice to young architects will be to listen and observe before beginning to draw anything. Enter the client's mind and think about architecture, starting from the needs. Don't be afraid of feeling lost. Expand your imagination and build your freedom based on the new knowledge. Accept criticism and take advantage of it to increase your attention. And that in architecture, there are a lot of possibilities of action in architecture, design, management, politics. And I think that we have to choose our battle. The next image, please. And about an important lesson we have learned about being an emerging architect in Peru. I think that is fundamental to understand the context where we work. And Peru is a multi-diverse country with 42 languages, 9 climatic macro-regions, and it has suffered from centuries of exploitation, colonization, and this has resulted in a fragmented and unfair country. And many different cultures and ways of living remain invisible, unknown, and unaccepted. They are not integrated with the global society, you know. And what we learned working with Amazonian native communities in Peru is to think outside the Eurocentric and patriarchal stereotypes and outside of preconceived truth. And our aim is to find the right dialogue between different ways of inhabiting. We're looking for an architecture that respects the local habitat and can be understood from a global perspective. And the last question is about the best piece of advice that we have received and by whom. And I think about the experience in Jerusalem de Miñaro project, when the head of the community once told me this phrase, we understand the forest and the air as our brothers. Our territory is sacred to us. We have to take care of it. A very simple message, you know, but we try to reflect this spiritual philosophy in our work, looking for creative solutions, starting from what we have, valuing and respecting local resources and knowledge. And I think that this is the best message that we have received. And it could seem obvious, you know, but it isn't. We have to look for an architecture in harmony with the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Taya Capital.
Hello. First of all, thank you again for the prize. We weren't even able to speak before, but we are really grateful and happy about this prize. And we can start with the first image. So for the first question, which is a piece of advice that we would give to young architects, we think that, first of all, currently in the world we live today, architects are fully plagued with images, and we are always trying to mimic more when we're younger what we see and what we like from what we see. Instead, we think that architecture, that strong architecture, comes from problem addressing. So the advice would be, from the given program or the given commission, understand and identify which issues can architecture solve, because architecture becomes strong when it addresses specific issues and when it becomes a mitigator of problems in different realms. So that would be for question number one. The second question has been very relevant for us, and it's an answer that we think could also become valuable for the larger architecture community. And what have we learned from our practice in the place where we live? And what we have understood from the years of practice is that countries like ours, and more than maybe 80% of the urban world, have broken urban fabric or irregular urban fabrics. And usually architects face elsewhere, not necessarily to these parts where there are not many means economic means to build architecture. Instead, we think that this is precisely where we need to look, to this broken city, to this not formal fabric, let's say, or broken piece of the city. And there, specifically there, is where we as architects are most needed, and where we should start looking for opportunities to work. And there are millions of opportunities because precisely these places lack of almost everything. So what have we learned is to look into the broken urban fabric, into the broken city, and start to build a practice from there.
And the third question is about what advice have you been given? And we thought about Lacaton and Basal when they say that always question the program of the commission, always question the commission. And this is what we have I think, managed to be a better film, because when you question the program and when you take the program that you've been given as part of the design process, the project becomes much better, because the perspective that we and a collaborative team have, it's very different from the client many times. The client has something in mind, and when you try to design the program and try to change the commission, looking at the place, the context and the place, it becomes a great amount better. No, so that's it. To take the program that you've been given as part of the design process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unpareled Architectes.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Well, first of all, thanks for the organization to carry on these awards through these difficult times. So thank you very much. Congratulations to Carlos. Y un saludo a México y a Perú to share this panel. Well, I'm Eduardo Cadiz from Unparade Architectes. We are placed in Lot, Spain. And the first answer to the advice we would give to an architecture student is that for us, architecture is a common place. It's culture, basically. Obviously, we were talked about this during when we were students, but perhaps not such in a direct way. No, we were focused on the history of architecture, but not in other things that we are convinced that are part of the architecture. We think in this common place come together, obviously, these illustrated examples of architecture, came together popular architecture, or if you want, architecture without architects, but also come together the personal experiences and all those affinities that are placed outside perhaps the traditional limits of the profession, no? As gastronomy, literature, visual arts, engineering, anthropology, politics, everything influences architecture, and even more, I think everything can be architecture. This is a painter by Renato Guttuso called La Buqueria, that is a market in Naples. As you know, in Naples, the central streets are itself markets. There is no building acting as a market. No, all the shops extend to the street, some furniture, and with all the products. No, I think it's a clear example to see in how, if you want to understand how is Naples and how is the shape of the city and the urban fabric and how are the houses organized. It's important to know how what they eat, and where they buy the food, and which vinculation, which link there is between the food and the city. In the second question, this important lesson that we have learned being an architect, where the place we work, the answer is about freedom and perhaps being yourself and using your own experiences without shame. I think this is very important to get certain freedom to propose the solutions to the projects. Look, in our case, we are placed 100 kilometers from Barcelona. Obviously, at least in Europe, we can know better. Perhaps you can organize the map with a kind of hubs. In the center of the hub, there is an important city with the schools of architecture, with institutions related to architecture, etc. And there is a way of practicing architecture in each hub of these ones. And I think it's important to be quite apart from this hub, to look into your own experiences in order to get the necessary freedom from the established way of practicing architecture in these hubs. Even well, I studied in Barcelona, I teach in Barcelona, so obviously we are in the same umbrella, but I think it's important. This is a photograph of an atelier of a decorator in Olot. He lived from the end of 19th century to the beginning of 20, called Sadouni Brunet. And I think this kind of professionals, that there were no architects, were able to use all the tools to build up the character of their constructions, from mangers like this, to interior designs, to furniture, to entire buildings. And perhaps they had more freedom and more knowledge about the materiality that the freedom we have as architects. And then the third question, the best piece of advice we have received, I think this is quite close to that one that Taya Capital said. This is an advice from Jorge Wagensberg. Jorge Wagensberg was a physician, a Catalan physician, son of Polish, who came to Catalonia. And he said that changing the answer is evolution. Changing the question is revolution. So this is, for us, is very important to reformulate the assignments. And we think that architects should be present in the places that the decisions are taken. This could be in politics, in companies, in associations. I think the most proposal solutions could be at the beginning. It's not. It's more important, I think, who elaborates the rules of a contest, that who participates in this architectural contest in this sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and the photograph, because I have talked about the photograph, but yes, I'm sorry. Because
oh, sorry, I'll get it back.
Thank you, Lily. This is, I'm sure you know, this is this installation of Matteo Ferroni called For Ove Yellen. And I think here he reformulates a question, because He says, the question, there were several projects that try to illuminate the streets in Burkina Faso, and all given success. And the problem was not, for example, the lack of electrical grid, or because with solar panels you can change and you can have lights in the street. No, the problem was that they should change the question. The question was that if we illuminate something, we don't have to illuminate the streets, we have to illuminate the activity. And he designed this kind of light with recycled materials that can be moved, and is thought strictly to illuminate the places where the people encounter and productive spaces, where women produce something artisanal, and is also an incoming source.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your advice. Can I just ask if anyone isn't already in gallery view to just come back into gallery view so we can all sort of be in the room together, and I think go just straight into our discussion. Everyone feel free to put things in the chat if you've got any questions, or to the panelists especially, just ask each other questions as well. As we've said, I think to start, I noticed, so there were a couple of you who had kind of specifically pointed to visual art and literature and kind of other sources that are not conventionally considered as being part of an architectural discipline as kind of inspiration. Edouard and Viviana and Noras in particular, and I was wondering if some of the practices who hadn't kind of spoken about it already wanted to share some of the kind of non-architectural inspirations and things that they've learned from, for example, in visual art or in literature. Can I pick on someone?
Yes, I can share as well. I believe that in fact today the contemporary art, especially in particular, a lot of work like Olafur liaisons, or I mean, so many artists are doing a job that has to do with architecture from my point of view. They are really proposing space, and they just let you enjoy and get excited and feel a little bit envy, because I believe they're doing more space than sometimes architects does. And it has to do that they work with problems as well, and they are always, maybe the ones that I'm thinking of, in a critical point of view about the world we live. So they take advantage of that, and they have a point of view, and they work with that, but also with very propositive spaces. And I think that is challenging for us as architects, to keep imagining things and feel free to propose. And I think the mix of the things that have been said, the idea of the program, the idea of the crisis, and all of these thoughts. And I mean, talking about literature, I just want to say that maybe for my students of the first year, I always encourage them to read The Invisible Cities of Italo Calvino. And I know it's like very common, but it's impossible to get excited just reading and discovering a new architecture and a new way to construct cities through a literature piece.
Thank you. That's
Thank
a really
you.
lovely answer. Oh.
I'm not sure if all these affinities out of these limits of architecture are only inspiration sources, because I think they are a necessary link from architecture to the society. We need to understand, for example, about the food, no, or about the traditional rules at home, no, how the people sit in the table, how they use the table, which importance has this piece as the center of the home. So I think we need to expand this knowledge to connect with the society and to give responses, because if not, there is a risk that all our projects could be auto-referential, no, in kind of isolated practice, and I think we have to establish a lot of links with the society. We are part of them, so we are not in a strange world, no?
I completely agree with you, and I think maybe kind of inspiration is completely the wrong word. It's reminds me of something that that Marta said. I'm also very sorry if I am mispronouncing any of your names, and please tell me and correct me, about kind of bridging between worlds, and about kind of it kind of also returns to this conversation that we were having in the previous session about the local and the global. And I wondered, especially as some of you are working, I know Taya Capital and Gabriella are kind of working in the same city, I think you said, and I wondered if you had kind of examples of projects that you really liked that are doing something kind of maybe quite precise or quite or like a small intervention that has quite that you feel has like greater resonance or an impact that is kind of larger than the sum of its parts. I mean, it's something I kind of see in your work as well, and from Unparade. Would anyone like to?
Yes, I would like to jump in. No, I think this is how you start from the small, and how can you introduce information from the arts world or the literature world into architecture, makes the discourse much stronger from the architectural perspective. And I want to pinpoint an example by this architect called Azra Aksamilla. She's a professor at MIT, and they specifically work with fabric, with weaving and embroidery. And it's beautiful to see how these projects that could be really the work of, or what women did to pass their time without probably no purpose, through the eyes of the architect becomes a game changer in spaces such as the refugee camps in Jordan. And it's beautiful to see how these pieces, and they are specifically doing tents for refugees, become spatial pushers or transformers. And I highly recommend this work. It's by Azra Aksamilla. And it's how the small, or how from the very little project, you can start making transformations. We have seen that specifically in our work through other projects. We have a very small pavilion, which is called the Hydric Pavilion, that was placed in a park in Mexico City. And what it did was catch rainwater, purify rainwater, and then give it for people to drink. And it also contained like an exhibition about how water works in Mexico. And it became a very important catalyzer for the larger projects we have done, because through this very small one, we understood that public space does have the capacity to become an infrastructure. And that's what we have been working on since then. So how from the small and from an almost sculptural piece, you can really start a transformation of an entire way of looking at things. And that's obviously what art does, and how architecture could become very closely engaged to art.
Hi. I'm here with together with Juliana, Susanna, and Julia, that we are in different places of the world, in the jungle of the north of Peru, in the central jungle, and in Italy. So I make the face, and I don't speak English very well, so I'm so sorry for this. And I try to answer about the first question that Lily made at the beginning, and I'm thinking about the teachers of Latin America. For example, I'm thinking about Paulo Freire, or an Italian teacher, Montessori, and I think that for us they are a very inspiring references in our philosophy and in our way to make architecture. And of course, the local knowledge and local legends and all of these, or the Italian teachers, you know, the participatory architecture during the 70s in Italy, with Giancarlo De Carlo, Super Studio, and all of this. And about the reference of local and global, I think that we are, when we speak about think local and build local, we are focusing on local development. But of course, we are trying to construct a bridge between different ways to inhabiting and different way to see the life. No? We meet a very contrast reality in Peru. And I think that is similar in Latin America, in Mexico, in Chile, Paraguay. My colleagues can confirm it. And I have a question too about this, because in Semillas we work together with indigenous communities, and my curiosity is if in your country are this population integrated into society, and how much do autochthons knowledge influence the practice in Latin America? Because we speak about from the city, I think, you know, or I think that this happened in Peru. We only think about the city, about or from the urban reality, you know. But the reality of Latin America, I think, is mainly rural. From my experience, I don't know if understand, but I can write. Juliana, can help me, please?
I think it was pretty clear, the answer, the question. So let's hear the others speak.
Yeah, we can answer Marta's question. We have cultural inheritance of the Guarani culture, and they were nomads, so they didn't build a lot of architecture as we know it, but we do still use the most important type of space that they used to build, which is an intermediate space, because normally their constructions were pretty ephemeral. So the intermediate space was the main space of the house, of meetings, of their way of living. So we still maintain that, even though it's something that we tend to forget. It's something that still lives on, and it's still embedded in our way of life. Because of our subtropical weather climate, we need cross ventilation, a lot of shadow, constant contact with nature. Also, the use of materials such as earth, bricks, adobe, wood is something that we still maintain, even though we transform some technologies, because we use rammed earth walls or compressed earth blocks, which are very ancient techniques. We incorporate new technologies such as metallic formworks or pneumatic compressors, which are products of globalized technologies. But the way of building is very similar to what we had in ancient times. So that is a small link we have to our cultural inheritance. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think it's like that.
I would like to add something to Marta's question and the thing about local. I think at least in Latin American culture, and I think everywhere else in the world, of course, but particularly our cultures are still really alive. It's what you mentioned, these rural landscapes, but these pre-Hispanic cultures, very tight even to the urban cities, people speaking on their own languages, and that is translated to the urban fabric. So it's a beautiful syncretism of ways of living, of even seeing the world, that I believe we need to take advantage of that. And I remember when I was designing a museum for agaves history, and I needed to travel to a very small site where they still build houses with agave leaves. And they were so beautiful, and they had some beautiful technique to do that. And then at some point that building was never done, but then my client, I am doing a distillery of tequila, and my client asked me to develop a pavilion. And for me, it was very easy to say, let's do it with the agave leaves, right? And to get that inspiration, more or less as they mentioned, these steel structures. And then you see the artisanal thing that is being lost, and there's no one that can build this anymore. So I think we are forced to encourage the use of these amazing techniques, materials, construction process that is being lost. People don't want to do them anymore. And at least in our countries, we still have that opportunity. And I think it's a great inspiration for us as to work with that. Thank you.
I would like to add another thing that I think it was very nice between the answers of Taya Capital, you talk about, I don't know if I will explain correctly, but about work in the broken city and the reparation. And I think the attitude an architect needs to understand that what we need is a reparation, not to build an strange thing, only can be built up with close looking to the problem and obviously a local answer. Then perhaps you can theorize and you can say, well, this could be global because this problem is similar to another places, no? But this first answer, I think it's only conceived with a local approach, no? Because you have the problem and sometimes the opportunity at the same place, no? It's how do you link these two worlds and have the answer.
Yeah, and probably also this very confusing area where rural starts becoming urban, and that's precisely where the issue is. How that's why cities are growing so much, because rural areas are really becoming urban areas. And the thing with how culture is evolving there should be one of our largest concerns, because usually people living in rural areas that are becoming urban have in their minds the objective of becoming urban from what they learn is urban, and usually leaving behind what makes them very strong, culturally very strong as communities. So I think that link between the identity of a community and how this community can regain or can gain dignity and purpose and the enough also infrastructure and equipment to have a better life quality is where we can really delve into, and how we can really start stitching and weaving together pieces, right? So how this transforming urban fabrics can become strong without losing identity and preserving quality. And it's obviously, as you said before, it's a global problem, but it's a local issue. It's something that has to be addressed locally with the tools that we have in each specific space and place.
And also I wanted to speak about the way we have managed to make a conversation and a dialogue with the community. And this is mainly through geometry. Maybe a lot of studios work with materials, other ones work with an array of strategies, but we like to use geometry to relate to them and to place structures that becomes the identity of the community, and these structures and these geometries are based in something that we see there. So it's easier for the people to make this how do you say appropriation, because we managed to see something there and related by the geometry of this is translated to the project, and maybe in a different material, but the geometry is there, and it is easier for them to appropriate this and make the project be identifiable and give them identity, because as you guys and Loretta has said, the rural becomes the urban, and these people lack identity. In many instances, they had identity before, but now that they become these broken cities and these irregular settlements, they lack a lot of identity, because these irregular settlements in Latin America are very alike, and there's very different. It's difficult to make them make them a different or a way of make them important or with dignity. So this is the whole aspect of architecture can address something that is social and address something that is in the sentiment of the people, and this we think make the project stronger.
If I can add something also, is the importance of building beautiful buildings in these rural areas and giving back that value to the local. It's important, and it's like the start from where you can regain back that dignity you were talking about, also about what's local and what's their own, what's part of their identity also, no? Because too often modernity is only associated with one image, even in these remote areas. So to change a little bit that point of view. And for us, it was a moment of proud when the chief of a community came to us instead of the contrary, because doing projects, generally we kind of identify the villages generally. So when he came back to us and asked us, I want to build a new community space for the village with food. And it was for us like a moment, because he saw the buildings we already built with that material. So for him, he wanted to revalue that material, and that was like this, seeing the start of a change, maybe that that was a moment of pride, I would say.
Thank you. This is such a wonderful discussion. I barely have to pose any questions. But one thing that we have been kind of asking everyone that I think is quite a nice one is that since it's been so long since you were shortlisted and so long since we published your work, what have you kind of learned in the last year that you would maybe like to share? Maybe we could start with Equipo de Arquitectura.
Well,
Yes.
I think.
Yes, well, we, in the last year, 1 year is a lot for us because we started our office 4 years ago. So we're a very young and new studio. So each year that passes, we have new work and new ways of seeing our profession and our discipline. So we have finished a couple of new projects that we think are based on our original philosophy, but tend to transform according to experience, which is obviously very important. So every single year that passes by is one more year of experience. No sé, algo más. I think that's it.
And Jose Pablo, you were about to say something?
Sorry, I missed here. Loretta wanted to say something in there.
No, well, to answer that question, sorry, about what we have learned is specifically that there is a chance to do these things that are usually at the beginning not very attractive. Working in these areas, you usually have low budgets, and it's not easy to make really refined material architecture, but still there is a lot of possibilities on using local construction methods and local materials, and having been shortlisted somehow strengthens the point that this is something that is not only recognized by a community or by the people that uses it, but it can also be recognized by our own profession. And for us, and I think for almost everyone in the profession, can become a game changer on where we work as architects, which are the type of projects we address. Maybe not only the museums and the nice hotels, which are very few in number, but probably more these other larger parts of the world where so much more attention is needed to be placed.
I would like to answer that question too. Do you hear me? I'm sorry, because my internet is really bad. Well, I think for me, a lot of things change in the last 2 years. Not only because in the same program that Loretta and Jose are working, developing these small infrastructure projects. Well, the ones they are working in are really big, but the rest we're working in smaller spaces along all our country. And in my case, I started to work, at this point I'm working in almost 35 different spaces in my country, which spaces that I haven't been before ever, and very small towns all around this big diversity of country we live in. And so even the pandemic forced you to be in-house. At the same time, I've been traveling to places I would never travel before. And I think that was a great opportunity to discover my country as well in another point of view, rather than these more commercial or touristic spots that we usually visit. And the second thing is the work of the virtual work and the presential work. I think for me, that changes so much. I live in a city of 25 million people. So I usually, my people and the architects, we usually have a time to work, you know, like arrive at 9, leave at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, work 24 hours. And I think that was terrible, because people needed to spend almost 2 hours to arrive to a place at the hour they should arrive. And I discovered I didn't need to have the people working at my site. I believe now that because of the typology of the city where we live and the conditions that we have, and also to understand diversity of the people that we work together. And you know, like a father that needs to take care of his kid, or a mother that lives so far, or and understanding that, I think I changed the way I work now, and I'm not going to go back. I think I will keep the virtual as an opportunity to have these short meetings that doesn't need to be presential, and I will and I like schedule my meetings with the team, of course, to develop the taller work, which is really important as well, and the maquetas and the models and everything that we need to touch and draw and discuss. But I believe that it opened for me another opportunity for the quality of the life of the people that we are working together, and have that opportunity of, as if for you it's important to go out and ride a bike to relax at any time. I need to confess that is part of something I want to break, and has to do with these patriarchal structures that some have mentioned before. And I think from our perspective, from our work, we can work upon that and start to change social dynamics as well, that will change space at the end.
Thank you so much. We're kind of coming up towards the end of our time, but I wanted to still kind of ask that question to those of you who haven't answered it yet. So Marta or Juliana, do you have anything you can share from the last year?
Juliana. No. Well, during the pandemic, here we stopped the work in the jungle, but we work in different places of Peru all the time, so it don't change the method, you know. But during the last year, I think that we learned about management and that to make reality a construction, it's not only the design or drawing, but the collaboration and the participation, not only with the community, but with together with the institutions. And the most difficult challenge for us was to work together with the government of Peru, and we have this strong collaboration with municipality, with the Minister of Education, but it was a large work, 10 years of work, 10 years making things with people, and we was invisible, you know, and now we are visible, and now government us, and it's very satisfactory, I don't know, and that at the beginning our clients were NGOs, but now are native communities, and it's very nice for us, and we feel part of Latin America, and we feel part of Peru. We live here, we live in the jungle, we live all the process, and I don't know, that's all.
It was a process, like Marta was saying, and it was a challenge from the beginning to try to work within the society, the governmental, and not just being something else. It was working with the municipality of the village where we work to start a small change from the inside, because that small change maybe with time can become a bigger change. And that's what we've been seeing in the last years, that to work within the rules, even if we don't completely agree with them. I mean, for us building school, we have, and when we finish the school is property of the government. We donate that to the government. So it means that it has specific rules that need to be followed. And we try to stretch a little bit every time those rules to push them through a change that it hasn't happened yet in the system. And every year we have work that has been a small piece that we added. So to stretch within the system, that's the bigger challenge that we faced and that we are trying to still do.
Edward, do you have anything you would like to add?
Well, perhaps before the pandemic, we were used to share our ideas always drawing, and always we talk, but the main tool was the drawing. And perhaps during the online working during the pandemic, we strengthened the talking as a way of designing. And I think this has remained, because perhaps it's now we have checked in the office that it's more inclusive for all the architects who work here. To perhaps we draw in this white wall behind me, instead of working in a A3 sheet that you cannot see the precision. No, we explain here the ideas, we share the ideas, and and then everyone completes this process. And even though this process, we have translated it into several projects in public space, that all the project is built by talking with the neighbors, with the owners, with the associations, and all these things collected become a transformation of this space, and are things that perhaps need to be drawn, but another one, the project is like a receipt or like an instructions list. It's not a conventional project with 300 designs and precision details.
Thank you. We are over time now, but maybe a nice note to end on is that I think Marta at the judging session said that they came to Peru as a kindergarten teacher, but when they arrived there was no kindergarten, so they had to build it first. And it's experiences like these and the kind of willingness to help implement real change wherever you are in the world that makes all of your work, yours in the panel, but also in the rest of the shortlist, so important and inspiring. This has been our final session of AR Emerging Architecture Awards Live. Thank you so much to our partners VM Zinc and Scale Careers, and to our really wonderful shortlist for sharing all of your advice and wisdom, and to everyone who has come along to listen today. All of these practices were featured in AR November 2020 with a brilliant keynote by Leslie Locko on what emerging means today, or last year now. But you can get that from our shop if you want to read more and see everyone's projects. But other than that, please everyone have a wonderful weekend and keep in touch with the AR. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thanks, Lily.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.